Oh, quickly, before I start, this is for my mum, who still doesn't know what I do for a living. So, if you can just smile. Hopefully you might know what I do for a living in 20 minutes. Okay. So yeah, this is me. Jim Piercy. I am creative director for WSJ Custom Studios for EMEA and Asia. And before that, I was creative director at Bloomberg, where I developed their custom content model for TV primarily. A team of creatives, writers, video directors, marketing executives, developers. WSJ Custom Studios are essentially the in-house creative agency for the Wall Street Journal. We are responsible for turning advertising revenue into content that our audience is interested in and want to engage deeper in. And that's an audience that is already qualified to a certain extent through the Wall Street Journal subscription model. A little bit about the journal itself. It's 125 years old. It's been voted for 29 years in a row the most trusted and reliable news source in the States. And we've won 40 Pulitzers. And we've also added over 300,000 digital subscribers in the last 12 months. We've never had more people paying for our content, which I think, particularly in the era of fake news, speaks to the value of quality platforms and quality journalism. Essentially, we make advertising. We're very proud of that. It kind of looks like this. I'm sure you've seen, we make advertising, we're very proud of it, and we've been pretty well rewarded for it. This is the show-off slide. But as you know, in advertising and agency world, we're very good at telling each other we're great and telling ourselves we're great. Does that work? Is that useful for clients? Does it work for clients? And if it does, how do we prove it and demonstrate it? So when I talk about stories, what I'm really talking about is content, or a series of content elements that together build a deeper engagement with a subject and by extension a partner brand. And when we're talking about content, we're talking about campaigns. And we talk about campaigns for a few reasons, but in the content space, we're not just on the hook for creating amazing, entertaining video or engaging long-form journalism or a UI web design that engages visitors. We're responsible for getting people to leave where they were and spend time somewhere they didn't choose. And that's why good stories and good content is so important. Because it's hard to get somebody to leave where they decided to go, where they decided to spend their time. And you're asking them to go and spend time with somebody else, in particular with an advertiser. And that's difficult. We're all time poor. In content, we're judged on time spent. It's not just a click through to an advertiser's site. It's engagement. It's how much you engage with that brand. So when we're thinking about our campaigns, what we're really thinking about is ideas, and not formats or even themes. And again, Andrew touched on this, but it still comes across my desk in briefs weekly. A video series, a content hub, a long form piece, then they're not ideas. They're not starting points. They're delivery mechanisms. But we have found some common threads in the work that we do across all our programs, and I want to highlight some of those today. So, is good content? Is it magic? Is it the genius of creative, or is it data informed? Does that data drive a deeper understanding of our audience that serves as a starting point, or is it a mix of both? Well, somebody cleverer than me put our content into these three buckets, which is authentic stories, singular stories, and true to platform stories. Now, authentic stories are stories that are linked intrinsically to a brand's DNA. They're truly organic to that brand. And singular stories are about a singular laser focus on one theme. And true to platform stories are about finding the voice of the environment where that content will live. So we'll start with authentic stories. Now, in my previous life, when I spent a lot of time, most of my time making TV advertising, TV commercials, almost every day somebody would say to me, "Oh, can you make us look like Apple? We want our adverts to look like Apple." And it's fine. That's a fair aim. Like by market cap, Apple are still one of the biggest companies in the world. They make great products, and they have some beautiful creative execution. But making adverts that look like Apple doesn't make you Apple. That creative expression of Apple is linked to many things: the personalities, the geography, the products, the company culture. You can't be Apple just by aping what they look like. So authenticity, it's really, it has to speak to a truth within a company. Companies and brands need a license to talk about something. They need a license to talk about themselves in particular in a particular way. And it sounds simple, and actually it is quite simple, but I think one of the difficult things is convincing a partner brand that that's the story that an audience is interested in. So an example of this, and you can find all these online, by the way. I'd rather talk about how we make this work rather than showing it all to you. But an example of this is a program that we put together that we called Multipliers of Prosperity. It's for MetLife Foundation. MetLife Foundation are a part of MetLife, the big insurance company based in the States, and they are their philanthropic arm. They've been around since the 70s for a start, and they are primarily concerned with financial inclusion in the developing world. This is something that they actually do. They're not just sticking a hashtag on something and then not putting their logo on an existing charity. They already do this. And so we worked with them and find out what this actually means. So, for example, in Bangladesh, 71% of people have access to a mobile phone, but only 34% of people have a bank account. So how do you help people develop businesses when they may have to take a day off work to walk to the bank and lose money? So we went to Bangladesh and we filmed with these women. And by the way, it is always women who they help, because who'd have thought they're better with money? It's no surprise to me. So they give these grants, but the point is that it's an authentic story. It's something that they actually do. It's real, and it's connected directly to their philosophy. It's not just an aspiration on a brand's part, and it's an emotive subject as well. You're changing people's lives. And it's not often that you think of an insurance company like that. And when we showed the first video in New York, people were actually quite emotional about that. And again, that's not something that you necessarily associate with marketing and advertising collateral from an insurance company. But did it work? Well, they gave us a KPI around visits to this site that we built for them. And during the first tranche of the campaign, we were 80% over goal in terms of those visits. The scroll depth exceeded Moat benchmark by 80%, which is not necessarily foolproof, but a pretty good indication of how much time people are spending with this content. And as a in-house publisher agency, we don't work on retainer for any of these people. So if this stuff doesn't work, they don't spend with us again. And we're on our third year of this program with them, which I think is testament to the work, but also testament to the value that brands like MetLife Foundation put into content, and the belief they put in that it will drive a deeper engagement with their brand, and you spend more time with them and you understand more about what they mean as a company. Singular stories now. One of my favorite film directors is a guy called Shane Meadows, English film director you may or may not know. But he was talking about where he finds stories, and he said, I don't like Hollywood budgets, and I don't like trying to think of Hollywood ideas, because actually the best stories for him are next door. Like literally, his next door neighbor will have a great story, and the guy who runs his local shop will have a great story, and his sister will have a great story. These incredible, interesting, moving narratives are everywhere. And it's true, and it's true of businesses and brands too. And in almost 20 years of doing this, I don't think I've ever worked with a company that didn't have an interesting story to tell somewhere within their organization. Now, whether they wanted to tell that story is a different matter, but they all had them. And it also helps if you can boil these things down to a single proposition, a sentence or a tagline. Less is actually more with this. Is an old cliche, but it's true. And our example here is probably our most decorated piece. It's a piece we did for Netflix when they launched Narcos. So that was nicely teed up earlier, thank you. And actually, we weren't given a lot of time to respond to this, but we felt as part of the Wall Street Journal, we had some authority, because actually the story of Narcos and the story of Escobar is not a story about drugs, and it's not really even just a story about him. It's a story about politics, and it's a story about economics, and that's two things that the Wall Street Journal talk about to their audience every single day. So when we were building this content, and it's a single long-form content piece, and we worked with an investigative journalist, and we actually interviewed the guys who the show is about. They came to our office. They brought us some photos from the day they killed Pablo, that nobody had ever seen before. We're not talking about Netflix. We're not talking about the show. There are elements of that worked in, but what we're talking about is this single idea of how a small-time smuggler from Medellin ended up taking a fledgling $1 million industry and turning it into a $1 billion industry that evaded the DEA for over a decade. It also helped that, we came up with a fairly catchy title, and when you land on this, you can digitally cut up coke if that's your thing. But it did work. The average session time for this was 30% over industry average, and 89% of people who saw Cocainomics said they were now more likely to subscribe to Netflix. And they don't tend to do renewals. Netflix as a company are famous for using different publishers to create content. They've done some amazing stuff with The Atlantic and the New York Times, but they did renew with us for season 2, and we still talk to them about current programs and forthcoming work. The last bucket is true to platform stories. So where authentic stories and singular stories are about the subject brand, we have to remember context. A piece designed for the Wall Street Journal might not work in another environment. It might, but it might not. And by the way, that's absolutely fine. That's kind of the point of native advertising, really. All publishers have their point of difference. What is that strength, and how do we translate that to stories that chime with that particular audience? So this is one of our latest campaigns. It's for Star Alliance, who are the first airline loyalty program. It was their 20th anniversary, and this was informed by a single piece of research that said the more you travel, the more successful you are. That there is a direct correlation between how much travel you do and business success. So we took that and we built that, and this was a collaboration with National Geographic. We built that into a campaign called Connecting Cultures. And our part in that was that we concepted a 5-part film series. So we challenged a personality to go around the world with Star Alliance. And for example, we took him to Thailand, and he had to learn how to Thai box, and then he had to fight a local. And then we took him to the Arctic, and we made him build an igloo, and we made him sleep in it. Unfortunately, I had to go with him, so it wasn't. I didn't think that through. But when I wrote those films, I was aware that they weren't going to live within the Wall Street Journal ecosystem. They were going to live on National Geographic, and they were going to live on Star Alliance, and they were going to live in flight on all Star Alliance planes. So tonally, those pieces have to be very different. We had to shift from what is much more a documentary style into something that fits much more in a television entertainment style. And we have the trailer for the series here. So, Simone, if you can play the video, please.
My name's Robert Reed. I'm a travel journalist, and Star Alliance has challenged me to fly on a round-the-world ticket to enjoy 5 unique cultural experiences. So, we'll see what happens. How do I look?
Yeah. Woo! Robert!
Oh.
Woo-hoo!
So we're going up, huh?
Yeah. Yes. Come along.
It's tough living here.
Say achoo.
Achoo. Bless me. What a place to be. It's just like this is built for riding a horse. And there's no precedent for this day, which is not over and already the best travel day of my life. We've arranged for you to take center stage at the Gathering of Nations. You're going to be racing tomorrow?
No, you will.
Turns out this is just the warm-up for my fight tomorrow.
Oh, boy. I honestly don't know if anyone can have an experience exactly like this, and it's really not the point. The point is we have to try. You will find experiences and cultures and friendships and lessons that can change your life. This certainly has changed mine.
So we had to find the common ground between our two platforms, and that is that the world's most frequent travelers are always looking for more, and from there we can build detail into that. So we used Nat Geo talent, which brings a levity and a familiarity to the program, and we built the locations, featured our hubs for each of the featured partner airlines. But tone of voice is key. You know, we had to match that to the environment where those films lived. I would say, though, that before I kind of summarize, that you have to leave room for surprise. Like in our industry, we often talk about demographics and we talk about groups of people, but we're not talking to groups of people. We're talking to one person. Every time it's one person, and it's a person with hopes and dreams and lives and loves. And, you know, like, I work in advertising. I'm interested in advertising, but that's not the only type of content that I look at and I consume. And to assume that somebody who spends their time on a financial news website only wants to learn about financial news, I think misses a trick. And it removes excitement and surprise, which is so important in producing a connection with work. So we have some universal learnings, and we have some proof points as to whether this stuff works. Well, 65% of Wall Street Journal readers recall the client who sponsored our content, above the unaided industry recall of 46%. 80% of those say their perception of a brand improved as a result of that content. And then the key for us with our audience is that 82% of C-suite executives actually trust that content, which again, right now in this sketchy digital era that we're in, this new frontier of digital trust, that's an incredibly important metric. So finally, I think some learnings, you know, when we're working on this content stuff, don't try and reinvent the client website, because they already have one. They already have all this information. It's out there. Don't do that. Content's not to do that. It's to build on something, build on a single theme. Work with good people, which is kind of obvious, but it's so important. And you know, remember that we're fighting for attention, and we're fighting for attention with people who we want, and we want them because they are, you know, they're a key audience. So be useful or be entertaining, preferably be both. Understand that there is no magic formula for this. I mean, I went to art school, so I'm kind of skewed on that. Like, I could just do whatever I want, and I'm still a believer in the best advertising being genius of creative, really, and that's something that comes from the heart and speaks to people. But if you think you found an incredible story for a brand, or if you are that brand that has an incredible story, a fantastic story to tell, be honest, be brave, and make sure that that's the story that you tell. Grazie mille. That's the only Italian I have. Sorry.